my dad was with IBM back in the 60s, where he actually wrote one of the first bill of material processors. And that I remember clambering into my dad's car as a 4-year-old and seeing the stack of computer cards on the passenger seat wrapped up with a little rubber band. And I picked them up. Well, what are these? And don't touch those, right? Because if the elastic band went, then there went hours of work.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Just like ERP, the bill of materials is perhaps the overused and oversold term. A BOM could be the assembly of two materials, like wrapping a gift for your birthday, or it could be the manufacturing process of the whole spaceship. But what if the process of manufacturing a spaceship resulted in waste material that could turn into a nice lamp? Would this whole process be captured as part of the bill of materials? How would the cost be accounted for each of them? Does the BOM differ for different teams? How much engineering data does the BOM need to carry? How much financial data does it need to carry? Can it also help procurement teams with their scheduling? Can it produce Gantt charts? Can it compute your contribution margins? These are the questions you are going to have if you are structuring BOMs for your manufacturing shop. If you don't configure the BOMs right, your costing, scheduling, inventory, supply chain, e-commerce experience, and profit margins will be all over the place. So what are the best practices for structuring the BOMs? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss bill of materials best practices. We discussed several types of BOMs and their misunderstanding that could result into operational implications for companies. Finally, we discussed several train wrecks and horror stories due to the poor structuring and governance of bill of materials. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We pick one topic related to digital transformation, and we always have a very exciting panel that is willing to share their insights and wisdom. For today, we have one of the hottest and most debatable topic, and we are going to have so much fun discussing that. It's called bill of materials. Even though it's called bill of materials, it's going to have implications on your entire manufacturing. So you better get it right. We are going to have fun discussing that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my intro. If you don't know me, I am Sam Gupta. I am principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. We help our clients in selecting, implementing ERP systems. I've been in the ERP space for roughly 20 years. And bill of materials, oh my goodness, the kind of problems that I have personally seen, it's just a nightmare. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to start with now. Bob, do you want to start with your introduction next?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Bob Feathers. I work for Bindable. We are in the InsurTech space. We're a SaaS provider, helping our clients, enabling them to do alternate distribution of P&C insurance products. But I come here today with over 30 years manufacturing experience, including business system implementations, specializing in ERP.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Bob. Chuck, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Yes, sir. My name's Chuck Huxhead, and nowadays I create warehouse superheroes. But for 35 years, I've been in the manufacturing space, and in fact, bills of material and design documentation is exactly where I started out my career, and continued with several ERP implementations and improvements over the years. And I'm really thrilled to be here. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Chuck. Chris, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. Chris Harrington, President and COO of Gen Alpha Technologies. We create digital commerce superheroes. Maybe that's something new we could say after following Chuck there. What's great for us is we repurpose manufacturing bills of materials to make the identification process for parts in a digital commerce setting very easy for owners and operators. So that's the world that we play in. I have never built a bill of material, but I've been a consumer of bills of materials for all of my career. So when they don't get it right, it sure is very frustrating for me and for the customers that we serve. So such a pleasure to be here with all of you today.
And thank you so much for being here, Chris. And whenever Chuck is going to be part of any show, everybody turns into a superhero. So now I have to deliver like a superhero. So thank you so much for being here, Chris. Abu, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. My name's Abu, and I am the president here at Penny Management Tech Corp. We are a Sage X3 partner, and we have been implementing solutions in the manufacturing space in a wide variety of industries, from chemicals, food and beverage to general industrial manufacturing. And we have clients all across North America.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Abu. Mark, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure, and thank you, Sam, for having me. My name is Mark Lilly, President and CEO of Lilyworks. The team here at Lilyworks created ERP systems such as Profit Key and visual manufacturing. So we've got a long heritage in bills of materials and routings and scheduling. So very excited about today's topic and hoping we can share with as many scheduling superheroes as we can.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Mark. And Bob, I'm actually going to start with the first question with you. And a lot of people, I mean, there are always going to be several definitions of what a bill of material is. In fact, I mean, bill of material, if you really think about the concept, it has come a long way. Initially, if you look at in 1980s, the bill of material was literally bill of materials, meaning it was bill of materials. Okay, it's no longer true. Okay, I don't know if it is going to require some sort of rebranding, because now you are going to have the whole bill of manufacturing. But in my mind, even that is misleading, because it can do a lot more than just bill of manufacturing. So let's say if you were to set the context of what a bill of material is and how it is going to affect different business processes. Do you want to start, Bob?
Sure. I mean, yeah, bill of materials is kind of a broad piece, but I like to kind of break it into the two components of what it is. And, I'll use like kind of marks, but like I look at it as kind of called the engineering master, right? And so what you're looking at the engineering master is two components that play off each other, but they're both really important to this whole piece, which is one is your process roadmap, right? So it's like, how do I get this? I had to make this item. This is my end result. What do I need to get to? And so to do that, I need to build this process roadmap. It says, what are the things I need to do? What are the resources and processes I have to go through my facility to get to this endpoint? And I kind of have that process roadmap. And alongside of that are going to be, what are the materials that go into that process roadmap, and where do they go into that process to again get to that end result? So it really is the combination of those two. And there's a lot that goes on in there, right? I mean, we kind of start around obviously unit measure, right? We had that thing a long time ago about unit measure, but unit measure is critical, because it's not just the unit measure of what you're making, but then how all the things that are going into making that, how they relate to that piece. So you got to have a really good relationship and know what that means inside of your unit measure of those parts that are going into it. So you got to have that right. We'll get to some stories about what that can affect if you're not doing it right. And then you have to get into the actual, again, the process roadmap of the machines that are going through and run rates and just kind of all that setup of how those things go through. And then there's a whole another subset of this whole thing is there might be a lot of other sub processes, right? It's not just like a clean process. Maybe there's a couple other sub components that are going into this final component. Again, I worked with more discrete items, but people might hear, if you're in the making, let's say, in the automotive industry, you've got a lot of components, right? You have all these different components going in to make the end thing. So depending on how you look at it, the bill of materials could be very complex depending on what your end product is. So I hope that's a kind of a good starting point for us to bounce ideas off of.
It's a very good starting point. Thank you so much, Bob, for that. So, Chuck, I'm actually going to come to you for your insights. And I don't know if you're going to have anything to add to the definition that Bob has provided. You can either add to that or share a story related to bill of material that you have seen and where you have seen some sort of implications because of poor bill of materials, I guess.
Well, I actually want to add on to what Bob said, and it's taking what Bob said and putting into language that we hear in the 21st century far more often. If I'm going to rebrand this thing, I'm going to call it a bill of value creation.
Okay.
Because we so often think of this, we come from a manufacturing perspective. I come from a manufacturing perspective. We want to build something, but in truth, there are sales bills of material. Okay, where we combine the items, and they may only go to shipping. Okay, so but in being that kit, in being that assembled collection of products that might be curated or they might be accessories, they deliver a higher level of value to the recipient. Okay, and I say the recipient because in that case you're going to a customer. In the manufacturing sense, you're adding value into this thing, and it may be going to your internal customer, which is the next operation in your process routing. So I really think of it, and that's really what it is, right? We're taking labor and we're taking disparate parts and we're combining them in some way so that we can create a higher level of value, aka higher level of cost. And so it's not to be taken very lightly because the higher level of cost carries a higher carrying cost if it sticks around too long, and the consequences grow and grow and grow the more value we add as we get further down the line and we make mistakes or there are quality issues or something to that effect. And in the sales bill of material, the ultimate mistake, the ultimate issue is that customer experience. If we get the wrong thing out the door. So I really think of it as a high value and in the financial sense as well, the costing sense and everything. It's higher value to everyone in the organization and the recipient.
Okay, amazing insights there. And by the way, I absolutely love the term bill of value creation, to be honest. Okay. And I think I am going to get 20 podcast ideas out of this show because, there are going to be at least 20 terms there. And we can probably create the calendar for the next year. But, Chris, I'm actually coming to you. When you look at the bill of value creation, obviously that's the outcome that you are trying to accomplish from the overarching effort that you are trying to set up. But to get there, okay, you need your data elements to be set up in the right manner. And typically the most complex part for a bill of material is going to be the different perspectives. And each of those perspectives are going to have very different data elements and the needs of each of those departments. The way engineering is going to see the bill of material is going to be very different. The way your production is going to see is going to be very different. Sales BOM, completely different. Bill of procurement, completely different. But you have to have the binding thread that actually ties all of these things together. And if you don't have that, the foundational element, your SKU, if you don't have that, then it's going to be really hard. So, in your experience, when you look at all of these perspectives, obviously your perspective is probably going to be slightly more towards sales. But when you look at the BOM, I mean, what are different challenges that you have seen?
Yeah, and I love coming after Bob and Chuck because I think I can combine. When I think of bills of materials, I kind of combine some of the things both of them are talking about. So, my experience is machines and equipment, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking about bills of materials, of course, bills of materials can be for smaller level components as well. But in my world and the world of the manufacturers that we serve, these are big products that are being produced. So it typically starts with a design engineer who has designed the product to achieve a function. We're going to dig dirt. So we're building a large piece of equipment to dig dirt. And a design engineer is really working on the ingredients needed. Their bill of material is the ingredients that are needed. Now, a production engineer is going to take the ingredients and build the recipe. So if you really think about it in that way, now it has to go through production and it has to turn into something that can be produced in all the different work centers that have things. And where the biggest challenges can be in building out a production bill of material, particularly when you have to execute on the side, is that the engineer is deciding what's going to be manufactured, what's going to be a purchase part. You have a higher level component that's going to go to work center. It might have many lower level components that go into building that assembly, and if one part is missing, the capacity planning is where you get a really big challenge, because if that one component is missing in that bill of material to start the assembly, so that assembly has lower level components, that component's missing, now you have to move shift your capacity and your planning because you're still waiting. So this is some of the challenge that's happening in a real world situation today as people have supply chain challenges. But when you go from the ingredients to the recipe, now you go to the service BOM, which is that not everything that goes into producing the machine is actually going to be a serviceable component later. So it's taking that next step. Okay, what are we going to put into our tech pubs, our interactive parts manual, to make sure that customers know when they have to repair this area of the machine, this is the assembly for that. Oh, and by the way, here are the components that go in that. If we're going to repair a specific area of the machine versus buy that complete, we need to have the bills of materials for that as well. So that's the way I kind of think of a bill of material. And I'm going to add one little thing, because again, I'm on the sales side, is that in sales, we sell a contract, right? So we are selling a thing that digs dirt. I mentioned that. But in that digging dirt, I also had options that I got to select. So I might have selected a few different accessories to go on to my machine that's going to dig dirt. If from the contract, from that customer's PO, that doesn't get into the engineering bill of material, as that option has to go into that BOM in that serialized inside your ERP, it could be a miss in the full execution. So you even have a typical engineering BOM that started is what you think you're selling, but the contract said, oh, by the way, we're also selling these other things. So you got to make sure that that gets into the BOM as well. So those are 4 components that I bring into this whole picture here.
Okay, amazing. And my listeners must be thinking, okay, we were talking about sales BOM, the production BOM, the engineering BOM, and the procurement BOM, right? So I thought we were going to be done with that. But now you have added 2 more layers in this space, which is going to be your service BOM as well as your template or the configurable BOM. And those are going to be additional layers that you have to think about if you are going to have either serviceable parts and the configurable parts as well. So thank you so much, Chris, for that. So now, since Chris has added 2, I'm probably going to add some more there. Okay, and now I'm coming to Abu. And Abu, you are in the process manufacturing space, and in process manufacturing space, things are going to be far more complex in general. The BOMs, the way the interrelation of your ingredients, the amount of insight that you are going to be requiring from your BOM is going to be very different. So in your case, you have complexity such as co-product, byproduct, and sometimes discrete as well as process. Both of them need to go together as part of one production line. So now, I mean, over to you, Abu. I don't know if you are going to add any sort of layers. You have a name for these BOMs, but I have got 6 so far.
Sure. I mean, I can probably add one more kind, which is the planning BOM. So, I
Yeah.
mean, BOM which drive your MRP processes, and but not necessarily your actual construction builds. But BOM, in my opinion, is a fundamental for any manufacturing organization. It drives your production planning, it drives your procurement planning, it drives your workshop floor planning, especially, for example, in food or chemical industry. You have allergens. So, for example, if you're going to use nuts and it's an allergen, then you have to clean the machine first before you can run another production line, or you cannot mix 2 chemicals together, right? So those sort of complexities also come driven from the BOM as well. On the engineering side, you have multiple systems which are managing BOM. So you have your AutoCAD and the CAD/CAM systems where engineers are designing your BOMs. Now that has to flow down to the ERP level. And as Chris said, sometimes the sales BOM is totally different what the end customer sees. I mean, there's lots of complexity, so version control, right? So you're making a piece of equipment, but based on different specifications, the BOMs can be significantly different for each equipment, especially on a custom manufacturing side. Um, on the food and manufacturing side, you have recipes. So you're making the same nuts, but it's a different flavor, so it's a different recipe, right? Whether it's spicy, barbecue. So you have to track all of those together as well. Another thing that comes in sometime in industrial manufacturing, Chuck was mentioning, before we joined about sheet metals. So what is the scrap percentage? What's the wastage of metals, for example? Or if you go on the food and beverage side, what's the wastage? How much nut, or if you're grinding food together, making how much it went attached to the machine when you went to the next process. So you have to take in all of those factors as well. Other complications that come in is how are the materials related to each other? Whether it's proportional, that's probably the most simplest, but more complex formulas also come in. And again, at the end, what it all drives down is procurement. If an equipment has 5,000 pieces, you can imagine the complexity in trying to procure all of them, making sure you have it in stock when you need it. So in my opinion, it's a very important part of your value chain, designing them, setting it up, sequencing them, managing the version controls, making sure you have the proper approval controls around it. So it's the main engine of your manufacturing process.
Very interesting layers there. So obviously, next round we are going to be doing a little bit of story. So maybe we can touch different aspects of how do you control these things. For example, you mentioned you're not supposed to be mixing these two materials. So I don't know how that integrity is going to be there from the data perspective, and what features you are going to require in an ERP system. Because obviously, if you are going to be using something like QuickBooks, good luck with that integrity. Okay, thank you so much, Abu, for that. Now I'm actually coming to you, Mark. And Mark, obviously, when you look at the world of scheduling, if I talk to my plant operators, they are always going to think the only thing matters is going to be scheduling. Okay, that's how passionate they are about scheduling. So I don't know if you guys call scheduling BOM, or is it going to be a BOM? But for them, that is the only BOM which matters, overall in the manufacturing process. But obviously, all of these things need to be aligned, even for the scheduling to work. If your procurement is not going to be right, then your scheduling is not going to work. So in your space, let's say if you were to add any other layers here, based on whatever we discussed in terms of the definition, what would you add to that?
So yeah, thanks for the softball on on scheduling. And look, that's who we deal with every day. And the reality, as I think Chris has mentioned, is with the supply chain chaos that's going on today, folks are at least concerned, if not more concerned, with material availability and visibility as they are their internal processing and their internal scheduling of constraints. Because clearly, whatever your priority system, however you're deciding what you need to work on next, you can't work on that unless you have the materials, right? That's the obvious piece. So number one, do I even have visibility of the materials and when they're coming in? Do I have visibility of what's going to be allocated? Okay, so I can see I've got 3 purchase orders coming in across the next 6 weeks, but which jobs are they going to, right? And those types of things. So now, and that's just the simple example with POs. As we've mentioned, there are subassemblies. So we're talking about supply orders. A supply order, yes, can be a PO, but it can also be another work order, right? Which lends to, and now you're going with Chris's dirt digger, right? Now you're going, 10 levels deep into supplying work orders and somebody having to manage, all when those are coming in and so forth. So if I may digress, what I wanted to talk about too is just a historical perspective, because my dad was with IBM back in the 60s, where he actually wrote one of the first bill of material processors. So we're talking about really, not quite machine language, but something higher than that. I remember clambering into my dad's car as a 4-year-old and seeing the stack of computer cards on the passenger seat wrapped up with a little rubber band. And I picked them up. Well, what are these? And don't touch those, right? Because if the elastic band went, then there went hours of work, right? But point being, the bill of material processor, which became MRP, was all that was designed when the U.S. North America was making a standard product, right? And even today, like Chris is mentioning, her dirt digger may be a standard product, but there's all sorts of options to it. So really, once it hits manufacturing, it's a custom product, right? And frankly, most manufacturers today are custom, are make to order in some fashion. So the tools that we've had and that still reside in many systems today are based on this traditional model of standard products rather than what you'd want to see with custom products. The issues there are multiple. One is just the lead time factor, right? To traverse a bill of material, you've got a standard lead time. Well, that lead time is going to vary, of course, based upon a lot of things, based upon the quantity of the end item that you're building, for example, right? Based upon what your capacity is and your constraint, based upon your material availability and the supply chain issues. So it's not a static number. And like Abu was saying, if you're doing this planning and you've got a planning BOM based upon static numbers, it's going to get you into trouble sooner or later.
Okay, amazing insights there, Mark. Thank you so much for that. So, Bob, I'm actually coming to you, and obviously, we are going to be doing a little bit of stories here. But before we do that, and I want to touch on one of the comments, and this is the trend that we are seeing with our customers as well. So, obviously, if you look at the product evolution, how manufacturing has evolved, we are seeing a lot more products that are going to have either the configurable or the customizable options. So I completely agree with Mark that majority of the manufacturing products are going to be slightly more customizable. But I have also seen scenarios where you are literally selling a sharpener, okay, or maybe a very commoditized product that is sitting on Walmart shelf, okay, but they are treating their production processes as make to order, and that is actually going to throw off everything from the planning perspective. And their rationale and the reasoning always is that I don't want to store anything in my inventory. And just because you are treating it as make to order, it does not mean that you are not going to store anything in inventory, or your inventory is going to be any inflated. Okay, make to stock could be optimized greatly as well. So I don't know if you have any sort of stories in terms of the way your manufacturing processes are versus the limitation of the system versus how you are executing them in the case of BOMs. So any stories, Bob, by any chance?
Yeah, definitely stories for sure. And I just want to kind of hit on that thread a little bit, right? Because this is kind of taking a step back, regardless of what we're making, whether I'm making it really just as a discrete product, like I'm making a credit card, or I'm making a dirt digger, right? It's everything in between, because we're talking about manufacturing, so it doesn't really matter where you're coming from. Going back to Mark's point is there is just kind of that high level, and where you are in that level starts to define what your strategy is. So, and I think Mark's right. Like, we were really a make to stock. Like, most of the stuff back in the day was like make to stock. Companies just made stuff. They just knew that people needed something, and they would just make it, and it would just kind of be available. And you just go like, oh great, I need that thing, and there it is. Even from the car manufacturer, right? You didn't go to the car dealership and say, I want this car with this, and this. Like, they're like, here's the car. It's black and it's got an AM radio. Have a nice day. Like, that's it. Like, you don't get to choose. Then, of course, there's the whole make to order, right? There's the whole under make to order, which is truly, that's probably where everything more is. But I think there's this in between, which people don't. And I think the real piece is like assemble to order, right? So there's a lot of people that are assembled to order, which means you have a kind of a lane. You're like, I'm in this lane, and it's kind of make to order, but I know historically what components are going to go into this. So there might be some pieces of it that I'm going to have ready on my shelf because those components go into these 10 things that I'm making that are kind of like the make to order things. So I'm kind of preparing. I might be using analytics to kind of know where I need to forecast. And that can help you, right? Because you're kind of making to order, but there's a whole bunch of assemble to order items that go into that you're kind of putting on your shelf to be ready to be, more lean, to kind of, it's lean, but it's like kind of have capacity to kind of bring things through a lot faster. So with that, I think is helping to define your strategy, because it helps to define how you're going to build your bill of materials. because that's, again, going back, it gets very complex. But you could say, look, I'm going to build an assembled order. I'm going to build these 10 components over here, have them kind of on my shelf, have a forecast, have a min max, kind of like I should always have some of these around because I'm going to have these things, I'm going to need them. And then when the actual things comes in, I just go, okay, I'm going to make the order. Okay, now grab these things. So the bill of materials becomes pretty easy because some of these just come in, they're already made. So I don't need to like add them in. It doesn't become a capacity constraint. So then it's really just what are the last pieces? What are the last things? So it's kind of, again, that assembly, make to order has some assembly pieces in it. So I think that's an important component too, is really understanding where you want to be, and then that helps you to build your strategy of how complex your bill of materials are going to be, or again, how you separate those things out. Because again, you can get into these massive sub-assembly ones, and it'll get really complex, and it'll be really hard to manage. So again, this also helps you decide how you want to manage your processes and making life easier for yourself and kind of keeping some things more discrete, so you don't have them all built up into one thing. So yeah, stories. Let's see. What do you want to talk about? I mean, we can go to the simple one. I'll give you like a simple one, just kind of circle back to the beginning component of just about doing it right. And this is a simple one just to give you a context of how you can do one thing wrong if you set it up wrong, and think about it, and we'll apply it to something else. So in this bill of materials was they needed a piece of paper. Like it was just, I need a piece of paper to go into this thing that I'm making fulfillment of credit cards for a client where I'm doing the fulfillment. It's got the envelope, got this, and I got this one piece of paper. Well, the paper is stored as a pack because they decided to cut. It's a pack. That's how I'm gonna buy it and store it. And they go, okay, well, in the bill of materials, I only need one piece of paper in that pack, which has got 500 pieces. So I'll make my pieces per 0.002, one piece of paper, 1 penny versus the $5 for the pack. Well, pack in your part maintenance has a divisor of 0. So you can't have anything less than a pack. So when you go through your work order and you go to transaction, it goes, I don't care. You said 0.0002, a pack can only be a pack. So here's your pack to this issue, to this work order, to this job. And now instead of having a penny, you have $5. And then you get to the end and you go sell it to the client and you look at your cost of goods. You're like, oh, this $10 revenue order cost me $15. What the hell happened? And you're like, well, you have a pack in there. You can buy it in packs, but that's your purchase. You should have stored it in pieces, which is a 1. It still could be divided as 0. But again, these decisions that you make, and this kind of go back to what we talked about in the beginning, which is this whole relationship, making sure I have the right ratios, the right relationship of how I start these things off. So replace piece of paper with computer chip. Replace piece of paper with titanium screw that costs, $50 to make. And these mistakes will cascade so quickly. So if you're making that dirt digger and you have all this stuff wrong, and you go, I sold this dirt digger for $100,000 and it cost me $1 million to make. And you're like, what in the hell just happened here? So again, those decisions really make an impact. So that was like one simple piece of paper. But again, put it into any context. And if you get it wrong, and you might not know it, right? People aren't really paying attention. They're just making the stuff. And then somebody at the end runs the costing routine and they're like, got a problem here. Something happened. So I've seen it a lot.
Yeah, amazing story, and BOM stories are always going to be so much fun. And sometimes when you are dealing with the complex equipment like what Chris deals with, it's going to be a nightmare to just trace what happened. Okay, just to answer that, it's probably going to take 5 days, 7 days. I don't know. So, okay. So, Chuck, I'm actually going to come to you. So we are looking at any stories that you might have related to BOM, either because of creativity, system limitations, or whatever. We are looking for some sort of drama because of BOM.
So I love the made to order concept because I don't think that people realize how it can deeply affect the processing itself. And in this world, there's this increasing desire to drive order quantity down to as close to 1 as possible. And one of the places where it can affect it is in consumables. So I have worked in a company, transformed a company where we went to a very high make to order, very low volume, on demand with extremely quick delivery. And the previous manufacturing method was, one person walks this thing all the way through. Okay. Typically they were dealing with higher numbers. It made a whole lot of sense. One person would stay in an operation. They had multiple skills. They would take it, they would cut 100, 500 of these things, take it, apply, some value to 100, 500 of these things. But then the consumables came along, and the consumables used to be something that were ignored. Okay. But what happened was when we went down to one, the cost to present the consumable became very, very high. So in a discrete consumable where I'm grabbing a half of a penny screw. Okay. But in something that has to be cut to length. Okay. To cut that to length for one person for one piece can multiply the cost by 10. And so the old method of processing that no longer worked. Now what actually had to happen was we had to come up with standard lengths, okay, and maybe 3 or 4 different lengths, and we would have to actually create work orders where we would have to make 10,000 of these things. What was formerly a consumable. Well, what do you do with that? Well, now you go into a situation where it actually has a SKU and you're distributing it, okay, to different work centers so that it's readily available and they can just pull, and it gets costed in. And right up to the consumables, there's waste. There's an awful lot of waste when you're taking something from something long until something short, and all that has to be costed in. So, but it can really affect the way you process, and you have to consider not only the agility but the cost of that consumable. And to do something counterintuitive, what do you mean I have to create a SKU for this little thing that is a quarter of a penny? Well, you do, because the processing can raise the cost by 10 times.
Yeah, could not agree more. And you have to look at your processes holistically. And if it is going to be consumable, obviously you need to have processes for that as well. So on that note, I am going to come to Chris for her stories.
Yeah. There's a couple that I'm thinking of, and I'll start with on the production floor for major equipment being manufactured. Oftentimes, what's engineered isn't the final product because they'll find out that the fitment isn't quite right, and they need to make some design changes, or maybe they had a specific hose that they had designed into the bill of material for a particular unit. But the guys that are on the floor assembling the unit, they go to the shelf and realize that the hose that was called out in that particular BOM isn't available. But they have another hose that would fit from a form, fit, and function. It's still going to be a good substitute. So they grab that hose and replace it on the line. But that never gets back into any of those changes, or any of the modifications that are made on the line don't get back into the original documentation. So then what is the machine that goes to the customer? There's a mismatch. So I see that as a problem all the time, especially on big make to order. Think about an ambulance where you buy the chassis from a manufacturer. That the chassis is a standard chassis, but now what the hospital that you sold it to, they selected many different locations where they want their storage areas to be. So you've got storage on the outside, you've got storage on the inside of the ambulance, and these are all different. There's variable options, and sometimes the inner workings, when you're starting to fit that all together on the production floor, it doesn't work. So you have to make a change. And I've seen packets go through the assembly line with sticky notes that indicate all the changes that you've made. And that's supposed to get back into the production BOM so that you know exactly what went with, and that's where errors can occur later when you're trying to identify the right. So now that ambulance gets into an accident and you have to replace the panel that was on that bill of material, right? So you go back to the BOM, but somehow the sticky note didn't get updated into the original documentation. So now I ship them a panel, it's not the right fit because somebody didn't update. So now I've got extra shipping costs. That ambulance still doesn't go to work because I've got to replace the right panel. Now somebody has to take a measurement and say, here's what needs. So I've seen this across many manufacturers. They have the right intentions. They put the sticky note in there, but it doesn't get updated into the ERP system and flow with that particular unit. Here's where I think I've seen many companies struggle when they try to create a kit. Okay, so let's talk about a complete pump. You have a complete pump that maybe is a purchase part. You buy it from a vendor, you assemble it into the unit that you've sold. When you want to replace the complete pump, easy. Now you have potentially as well a bill of materials for the pump if you're going to repair the pump. So did you get the full bill of materials from that vendor and put it into your bill of materials? So if you just need to get some replacement parts for that pump, can you identify them? So it's getting your vendor's components in there so that those are sellable later. And now for somebody that's going to repair the pump, maybe don't just sell them the individual components, sell them a kit, okay? But a kit is made up of multiple units that have to ship complete together. You don't ship a kit as individual units, you combine them. But often where I see manufacturers struggle is they don't have a work center to assemble the kit. That's something that shipping has to do. So it's getting the bill of material and the instruction to a group so that they can assemble that kit, package it as the kit, and go out the door. Additionally, the roll up of, you have to have all of the different parts in your kit have to have the right lead time in there, because that becomes the lead time for the kit. You have to have the right pricing for all the individual items, and then whatever markup you put on it so that you're putting the right price on the kit. Some people will, put more margin on a kit because you're adding incremental value to the customer for buying a kit versus selling them the individual parts. So your margin calculation might be slightly higher on kits than on the individual components. So putting a bill of material together for what is a kit is something that I've seen a lot of manufacturers struggle with, because it's not like they're building something, so they don't have a work center for it. Their shipping department has to do it, but the shipping, they just go they go grab individual items, package them in a box, but you have an individual SKU over the top of that. So creating the process to get that kit right is something that people struggle with. So those are some examples.
Amazing, and love these sticky notes, to be honest. Okay, and some systems actually have created a sticky note inside the system. They literally call it a sticky notes. That, okay, if you like your sticky note so much, maybe do it in the system. Okay, yes, your data integrity is not going to be there, but at least that is going to be there in the system. So love the story. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Okay, Abu, I'm actually coming to you for your story, the crazy scenarios that you have seen with respect to BOMs.
I have one scenario, which I remember very fondly because it made us a lot of money. And it became a good client afterwards as well. So we got an SOS call from this company who had went live with, with Sage X3 with another partner, and they said the entire manufacturing operation has stopped. They could not invoice their customers for 3 weeks, and we need people to help us out. So we flew in there, and we found that they had made some simple mistakes in their BOM structure. They were a chemical company, very simple proportional BOMs, nothing complicated. But just because they had not maintained it properly, they had run into a lot of trouble. So what they did was, you have an end manufacturing chemical, and you have raw materials in it. So they had no control on who created the BOM and who created the raw material. So for each raw material, they had 5 different product codes in the system. So when the people on the production floor went in to enter the data into the system, they could not find the raw material in the system. But the raw material existed. It was because the procurement people, received the raw material against a different product code, which was different than the BOM product code, right? And so what they had to do was they had to do a miscellaneous issue out from that where the procurement had received the product, the raw material, do a miscellaneous issue into the BOM raw material, and then complete the work order and then invoice the customer out. And they had two levels of BOMs. Each BOM would have 5 or 6 raw materials, and they would have an issue with each and every line of the raw material. So when we went there, they had this pile of paperwork which they were not able to enter in the system for the last 1 month, and they could not invoice their customers out, right? So imagine the panic in the management team over there. So I mean, so that's what it can lead to, right? So you let your people go run amok with your product codes, with your BOM structures, and what some very simple things can cost you a lot of money, right? So we ended up writing automated routines and automating that data entry process, but it was very costly for them. So that's my story, right? So even if you have a simple BOM structure, a simple mistake like letting your people create multiple product codes and multiple BOMs for the same product code can cause a lot of problems, right? So I never forget that. so, so yeah, so I think so. My moral of the story is make sure there are controls in the system in your organization to set up the product codes, especially related to BOMs. So.
Okay, amazing story there. And by the way, I mean, see, we have missed the most critical bombs, to be honest. Okay, so I know that we are going to have sales, production, etc. But the most critical bombs are going to be your paper bomb, spreadsheet bomb, the sticky notes bomb. Those are the most critical bombs. Thank you so much, Abu, for that. So, Mark, I'm coming to you for your story.
Sure. Yeah. Just a couple comments on what's been said so far. One is with make to order. Some systems you need a BOM and to make anything. You need a BOM and a routing like a standard to make anything. Some systems that are designed specifically for make to order or custom manufacturing will have a work order that represent it may be starting from a copy of that, but then you can track the as built, right? So it's like a copy, and now the way you actually manufacture it, the materials you actually use on it throughout the process is recorded. And the nice part of it, some of the more flexible systems as well will allow even something to be added. Certainly if you have a part number, but even without a part number, it's this one-off thing we need. We even have to go buy it, so the cost flows into it and that sort of thing. But so I thought that was important to point out. In terms of Chuck's example of the having to create a new part, it's such a great example with a cost factor. What I've seen, and my story really relates to, and there's a number of examples you can personally I have working with clients or others in industry is where you look at a BOM and you look at the lead times, right? So imagine the top level and then the traditional tree structure going down. And in each level of that tree structure, right, if it's a manufactured part, you've got an internal lead time. If it's a purchase part, you may have an outside vendor lead time. But regardless, and especially with like Chris's Dirt Digger, you've got many, many levels and all these different times you need. So ultimately, the overall time from bottom raw material or purchase material all the way up to the top can be, months, sometimes years, right? So what we've seen is looking at that and looking at all your products. So even where you may have a standard product, you may have it with options, but you look at the strategic positioning of inventory within that BOM. And by strategic positioning, I don't mean a warehouse in Milwaukee and one in Miami. I mean strategic positioning within the BOM. That is looking at it and consciously deciding that at this level in the BOM, we're going to, instead of manufacturing up to that point, we're going to stock that. So we're going to create, and now the challenge becomes is how much do I want to have, right? And depending upon the cost, right? What can I afford to have in terms of stocking that? But it's obviously very dramatic, right? So now you're taking a product with a lead time of months, maybe years, and bringing it way down to in a factor of 3, 5, 10 times lead time reduction by walking through this and looking at the value creation, right? And how much is that faster lead time worth relative to the holding cost of the subassemblies throughout the BOM?
Could not agree more, to be honest. And I love the way you have described, to be honest. And this is where your make to order versus make to stock conversation is going to be slightly easier, because you are stocking a lot more in between. And again, you are not really increasing the inventory value as such. Your planning is going to be easier, because rather than planning for the whole thing, you are planning for much smaller thing. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. So we can do one more round overall in any short comments that you might have on the comments that we have had so far. So Bob, coming to you, comments over comments.
Yeah, I actually just want to go off of Abu was saying. I think it's really an important component he just touched on, which is governance. I think it's a really important piece for you as an organization to really come up with a couple different components. And I did a bunch of that, which is governance, like kind of who has control of these? Who are you going to allow to actually build these or be in charge of them or monitor them or evaluate them or go back, kind of, or get the sticky notes. Like you should have a good process and a solid process around that and have controls in place. Like, I had controls like who had, just going back to, baseline like security, like who has access to modules and who can edit and do stuff. Like you should have some real tight controls around your BOM and your part maintenance. In that same component of governance is build a roadmap. We did a lot of that, again, build a roadmap of your part maintenance, like really build a roadmap. Like, why do parts exist? How's the naming convention? Going back to Abu's thing of having like 5 different names for the same thing. It's like, that's the person that gets brought out back and, shot, because like, but it could be the person who allowed that to happen. So again, going back to governance is building a roadmap of what that roadmap looks like and how I describe it and say how I'm going to build parts, why I build parts, how I name them, how I do this, how I build BOMs, why I build BOMs, just really building a strong strategic roadmap of what your organization wants to do and how you want to operate and process, and have a strong governance team around that. I can't say enough about that, because I've seen so many of these examples over time. Because the other thing you're going to deal with is you will have attrition. You'll have attrition. It just happens. And so, think about it 10 years from now. If you don't have a really good roadmap, 10 years from now, people are like, why do we do the stuff we do? And everyone's just like, I don't know. Like, there's no one knows why things are happening anymore. So then you build 5 more SKUs for the same thing because people just don't find it. Oh, whatever. I'll just build this one because I need it. And you just build it. Next thing you know, you've got chaos. So I would add the governance. I think that's a really important component.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, Bob, for that. Chuck, I'm coming to you. Any comments over comments, stories over comments?
Yeah, I along the line of governance and building these things out and controlling the product SKUs, I would encourage people, as you do this, as you build out your BOMs, as you build out your systems. I mean, typically, if you're layering an ERP on top of an existing organization, it's extraordinarily difficult to do. For goodness sake, take the human association out of all of your part numbers and the things that you create. You will absolutely positively build yourself into a corner. You'll run out of characters, okay, whatever the heck it is. The problem is that's a double-edged sword. Thankfully, we have really great computers for that, because when you take all of the significance out of it, it's very easy to build duplicate product codes because they become essentially completely random. So it requires a great deal of discipline. It requires a great deal of governance, to use the existing language that's been used by my colleagues here. But get yourself out of that. You've spent tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on this amazing computing system that doesn't think like a person. Use its strength, okay? And you have to let go of that sense of control. And when you do that, it can really be liberating. To really give into the system and allow it to realize all of its functionality, not just a portion of it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chuck, for that. Chris, any comments over comments, stories over comments?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to bring in the sales element again, because there's so many organizations that are thinking about CPQ or already doing CPQ, right? Configure, price, quote. So they start with the customer facing side, whether it's a dealer who's configuring a product for an end user or it's the customer who gets a choice to configure. I've seen a lot of configure price quote built by the sales team for a sales solution, and they don't always tie that into what gets executed through the ERP system. I want to emphasize how important it is that if you're going to have options inside your CPQ, they need to be options that have been built also and the rules to go along with them inside the ERP system, so that when options are being selected and the customer orders, that can be then consumed by the ERP system to allow for all the scheduling that Mark was talking about earlier. Because if what is quoted and sold to the customer is different than what you've produced, you have a delay right from the beginning. It has to be created. So this is where tying that CPQ to what gets into ERP, and then fully what you're going to submit as the documentation that goes with that piece of equipment to say, this is what we sold to the customer, this is what we billed to the customer, and this is the material that they need to service that piece of equipment. Now, tying those three. So when I hear defining your processes and making sure that you're truly the governance piece, that's where I think things get so missed, especially in today's world where we want to create a better upfront experience. It still has to be tied to everything that goes downstream. And I do think organizations need help with that. This is where when you're working with a vendor, you really need to have somebody who can keep reminding you, well, how is it set up in the ERP system? How does that roll up? Where are we going to get the price for that option? How do we know how that option affects the lead time for delivering this machine? That should all be rolled up in the ERP system and consumed by the configurator so that the output going to the customer is setting the right expectation.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Abu, any comments over comments?
Sure. I mean, so one thing we probably didn't discuss as much was the costing aspect of the bill of materials, right? What's the cost to make my product? And that all comes from the BOM. And in terms of work that comes to us, again, it's something that, customers often come to us say, how come it costs this much, right? Like we thought the cost was X or $20, it's coming up with $30. So really, when you have those complex BOMs and you have those fast moving raw materials, it's, what's the costing methodology on my components? How is that costing methodology going to affect my final end product? It's the ability to understand those costs, which is essential, very important from a BOM perspective. Some companies, what they would do is they'll also have a different BOM called costing BOMs. Right? So you have planning BOM, you have costing BOM, so just added one more to the list. So a lot of larger companies, perhaps like automobile sector or companies which have been in the manufacturing for the last 60 years, they have more mature processes and they can probably do a better job in estimation. But companies in that 150 million to maybe $500-600 million range, where the processes are not that mature, they have a lot of trouble understanding the true cost, right? A lot of time it's based on the gut. It looks right or it doesn't look right, right? And that's how they're making the decisions. So, one thing that we should also focus on when building those BOMs is how will it affect the overall product cost and how we can use those planned costs to make better financial decisions.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, Abu, for that. Mark, any comments over comments?
Yeah, definitely. So I think everyone is laughing about, the costing BOM, because even if the software doesn't explicitly, manage or have something called a costing BOM, everybody is using BOMs in different fashions, right? Depending upon the culture of the company or within the company or what have you. So invariably, oftentimes we walk into a company and trying to help them with scheduling. The first place you go is to look at the BOMs and the routings. Are they representative of how, even never mind the material flow through the processes, are they representative of the steps in the process that actually occurs, right, when they build something? And, if oftentimes the CFO and the folks in accounting are the ones making the decision on the ERP, and they're they're the ones driving the implementation. So the BOMs are, costed really well, right? You can quote off of them, but once they hit production, then it's another story. So, and it goes very deep. So it's not just, the routing per se. It's also, where are materials called out, right? So initially they just want to get something in the system. So yeah, let's just put all 400 materials that we need for the dirt. Let's just put them at that first operation, so we know we're going to have them when we start. Well, the reality is you may not need that, the $50,000 motor until, the final assembly is several months later. So now you're tying up all this cash. So that's just one. And you get back to unit of measure. Bob is so passionate about, and he's right. What we find oftentimes is that because units of measure change during the manufacturing process, folks are forced to actually create. We've seen this many times in the last couple of years, actually, where folks have to have a work order for each operation step, having to receive material into inventory, reissuing it back out, because the unit of measure of the material changes from step to step through what should be a single operational routing. So it is really important to look at that and make sure the technology and your architecture supports the way that manufacturing happens, production happens in your environment.
Okay, could not agree more. Thank you so much, Mark, for those. So we are super short on time, so we can probably take just one word closing advice. Bob, what is going to be your closing advice for today?
Strategize.
Amazing, love it. Chuck, what would be your closing advice?
Get rid of your sticky notes. Sorry.
Love it. Thank you so much. Chris, closing advice, please.
Discipline around the processes.
Love it. Thank you so much, Chris.
The governance around creating BOMs.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for that. Mark, closing advice, please.
Yeah, representative. Make sure your production, your BOMs, routings represent the way production happens.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, guys, for that. And that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We pick one topic related to the digital transformation. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another topic. On that note, thanks everyone for your time and insights tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. See you
Thanks,
guys.
Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks all.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Christina Harrington, head over to janalpha.com. It's DANALPHA.com. If you want to learn more about Chuck Coxhead, head over to procensis.com. It's PROCENSIS.com. If you want to learn more about Bob Feathers, head over to bindable.com. It's BINDABLE.com. If you want to learn more about Abu Asif, head over to pennymanagement.com. It's PANNIMANAGEMENT.com. If you want to learn more about Mark Lilly, head over to lilyworks.com. It's LILLYWORKS.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Bob Feathers, who shares his insights and lesson learned from a multi-site ERP implementation. Also, the interview with Sneha Kumari, who shares her insights into how SLAs and resource mix impact shop floor scheduling. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.